Adrian was still laughing when he signed the last page. "Finally," he murmured, dropping the pen onto the table. Then he leaned toward his attorney and said just loudly enough for me to hear, "Now she'll find out what things actually cost when someone else isn't paying for them." His lawyer gave him a tight smile. I said nothing. That seemed to please Adrian even more. He adjusted the cuff of his expensive suit, looked across the courtroom at me, and gave me the same smug expression he had worn 2 months earlier when he placed divorce papers in front of me and told me our marriage was finished. To Adrian, my silence meant defeat. He had no idea what was sitting inside the financial disclosure folder in front of the judge. I sat beside my attorney in a simple navy dress, my hands folded over one another. No designer bag, no dramatic entrance, no attempt to compete with the image Adrian had carefully built around himself. For months, he had told people that I was going to regret losing him, that I had grown too comfortable, that I had no idea how fortunate I was to be married to a man earning what he earned. He had even told one neutral friend, "Narechia thinks life is easy because I've protected her from the real world." I heard about that comment 3 days before the hearing. I almost laughed, but Adrian had not simply asked for a divorce. He had tried to make sure I felt powerless when he did it. 2 months earlier, I had opened our banking app while sitting at the kitchen table and noticed something strange. The balance in our joint household account had dropped sharply. I refreshed the page, same number. I checked the transactions. A large transfer had been made the previous afternoon. I had not authorized it. That evening, Adrian came home carrying a thick envelope. He placed it in front of me. "What's this?" I asked. "Divorce papers." I stared at him. He did not sit down. "The marriage is over, Narechia." Then he glanced around the house as if he had already stopped seeing it as ours. "You should probably start looking for somewhere cheaper." I looked back at him. "Cheaper?" He sighed. "Don't make this difficult. I earn the real money here. You work from home doing whatever consulting thing you do. I'm tired of carrying everything." That sentence told me more about our marriage than the papers did. Adrian did not know what I earned. He had never asked. He had simply decided. Now back in the courtroom, his attorney rose. "Your Honor, my client would like to proceed with finalizing the remaining financial matters today." The judge nodded and began reviewing the declarations. Adrian sat back comfortably. His salary was mentioned first, then his retirement account, then several other assets connected to his employment. With every number, Adrian seemed to sit a little taller. I could almost hear the thought running through his mind. This was proof. Proof that he had been the successful one. Proof that I had needed him. Then the judge turned the page. "And now Mrs. Cole's financial declaration." Adrian was still smiling. My attorney did not move. The judge scanned the first few lines, then she stopped. Her eyes returned to one section. Adrian's smile weakened. His lawyer suddenly lowered his head and began flipping through the documents in front of him much faster than before. I remembered Adrian's words from the night he demanded the divorce. "When this is finished, you'll finally understand how much you needed me." The judge looked toward my attorney. "Counsel, the valuation documentation attached to Mrs. Cole's declaration has been independently verified?" "Yes, Your Honor." Adrian turned sharply toward his lawyer. The laughter was gone now. He leaned closer and whispered, "What valuation?" Several months earlier, Adrian walked into our bedroom carrying an envelope. He did not look nervous. He looked prepared. He placed the envelope on the dresser and said, "I've already spoken to an attorney." I looked up from my laptop. "About what?" "Our marriage." He said it like he was announcing a business decision. No hesitation, no apology, just a conclusion he had apparently reached without me. I closed the laptop. "Go on." Adrian exhaled through his nose and loosened his tie. "I think we've outgrown each other." "We?" He ignored that. "I've changed, Narechia. My career has changed. My responsibilities have changed. My life is moving forward." I stared at him. "And mine isn't." He gave me a look that answered before he spoke. "You work from home. So you sit here in leggings staring at a screen doing your little computer projects while I'm actually building something." There it was. Not sadness, not disappointment, contempt. I stood. "Do you actually know what I do?" Adrian laughed. It was short and dismissive. Come on. No, answer me. He folded his arms. You consult. You help companies with software or numbers or whatever. Whatever. You know what I mean. I did. He had no idea. Years earlier, I had tried to explain the platform I was helping build. I had told him we had attracted serious investor interest. He had interrupted me halfway through. My director is trying to block my promotion, he had said. So I listened to him instead. Later, when I traveled for a shareholder meeting, he barely looked up from his phone. When legal documents arrived at the house, he called them your paperwork. When I reinvested my earnings instead of buying expensive clothes, he took that as proof I was not making much. I kept driving the same reliable car. I kept working from home. And Adrian kept assuming simplicity meant failure. Eventually, I stopped trying to explain myself to someone who had already decided who I was. That night, I pointed to the envelope. So, you already have papers prepared? Yes. How long have you been planning this? Adrian hesitated. That hesitation was enough. I walked past him and opened the banking app on my phone. The transfer I had noticed earlier that day was still there. I held the screen toward him. What is this? His jaw tightened. That's temporary. You moved money from our joint account. I moved some of my money. Our account. I needed to protect myself. The words changed everything. This was not a man who had simply realized he was unhappy. He had been preparing, calculating, making sure he had an advantage before I even knew there was a fight. How much did you move? That's not the point. It is absolutely the point. He picked up the divorce papers and pushed them toward me. You can keep most of the furniture. I'm not trying to make this ugly. I almost laughed. You drained money from our joint account before telling me you wanted a divorce. I didn't drain it. You moved enough that I noticed immediately. Adrian rubbed his forehead. Nursia, I'm trying to make this easier for you. For me. Yes. If you sign quickly, we can avoid wasting money on attorneys. I looked down at the papers, then back at him. You already hired one. That's different. Of course it was. Everything Adrian did was reasonable. Everything I might do in response was somehow excessive. I picked up my phone. He frowned. What are you doing? Taking pictures. Why? Because I'm not signing anything tonight. His expression hardened. Don't start making this complicated. I photographed every page. The next morning, I sat across from an attorney with the divorce papers, bank records, and transfer history spread across his desk. He studied the documents quietly. Then he looked at me. Your husband seems very confident you're financially dependent on him. He is. Is he correct? No. The attorney leaned back slightly. How incorrect? I opened my bag and placed another folder on the desk. He looked at the company name printed across the top. Does Adrian know about this? He's heard the name. He knows your ownership position? No. Your income? No. Your investments? No. He stared at me. How does a husband not know any of that? I looked toward the window. Because eventually he stopped asking. The attorney opened the folder. Full financial disclosure means both sides will have to show everything. That includes his transferred funds. I understand. And it includes your assets too. I understand that as well. He turned the first page, then the second. His eyes stopped moving. He looked down again as if checking whether he had read the number correctly. Then he stood, walked to his office door, and quietly closed it. Adrian, are you seriously celebrating your divorce? I heard the question before I saw him. 3 weeks before our court hearing, Adrian was sitting at a large table in an upscale restaurant with several mutual friends. A half-empty wine glass sat beside him, and from the way everyone was looking at him, I knew he had been talking about me. Adrian laughed. I'm not celebrating the divorce. I'm celebrating getting my life back. One of our friends shifted uncomfortably. And Nursia? What about her? How is she going to manage? Adrian leaned back in his chair. That's something she should have thought about years ago. She'll finally learn she can't maintain her lifestyle without my salary. Another friend frowned. Is she fighting you for money? Adrian smirked. What else would she have to fight for? That was when he saw me. I had just entered the restaurant. I wasn't there for him. Daniel Mercer was waiting for me near the back, and we had scheduled the meeting days earlier. But Adrian lifted his hand. Naresha. Several heads turned. I considered walking past. Instead, I approached the table. Adrian looked me up and down. Business meeting? Yes. He smiled. Good. Lawyers are expensive when you don't have much income. The table went quiet. One woman lowered her eyes toward her plate. I could have corrected him. I could have told everyone exactly how wrong he was. Instead, I looked directly at Adrian. You should probably worry about your own financial disclosure. His smile tightened. So, that's what this is about? What? You think threatening me over that bank transfer is going to get you a bigger settlement? I didn't threaten you. You didn't have to. I glanced toward Daniel. I have a meeting. As I turned away, one of Adrian's friends suddenly stared past me. Wait, is that Daniel Mercer? Adrian frowned. You know him. Not personally, but I know who he is. Daniel stood as I approached. Adrian's friend leaned closer to him. He was involved with the technology group that acquired that fintech platform a few years ago. Adrian shrugged. Naresha does consulting. It's probably something like that. But later that night, curiosity finally did what years of marriage had failed to do. Adrian searched. He found articles about the acquisition. He found the names of executives, early investors, and people connected to the company. Then he found a surname he recognized, my maiden name. For a moment, he stared at it, then he dismissed it. Coincidence. Maybe I had worked there. Maybe I had owned a tiny percentage. Whatever the explanation was, Adrian remained certain of one thing. It could not possibly make me wealthier than him. The next morning, his attorney was far less relaxed. We need to discuss the transfer from the joint account. Adrian crossed his legs. What about it? The timing. It was my money. It was held in a marital account. I earned most of it. That doesn't mean you can move it before filing for divorce and assume nobody will ask questions. Adrian's face hardened. Narazia is trying to make me look dishonest because she wants more money. His attorney stared at him. Have you reviewed her financial declaration? There's no point. There is absolutely a point. I know what she makes. Do you? Adrian paused. His attorney pushed a folder across the desk. Stop discussing this divorce with friends. Stop making assumptions and read the disclosures before we get into court. Adrian barely glanced at the folder. She works from home. That is not a financial category. She has some consulting income and maybe a few investments. Fine. His attorney did not respond. That silence finally irritated Adrian. What? The lawyer opened the folder himself. He looked at one page, then at Adrian. The confidence Adrian had carried into the office suddenly had nowhere to go. His attorney spoke slowly. Adrian, I think you have seriously misunderstood who had the money in this marriage. What exactly am I looking at? Adrian stood over his attorney's desk the following morning, staring at the financial documents he had ignored for weeks. His lawyer pointed toward the chair. Sit down. I don't want to sit down. Tell me what these are. Your wife's disclosed financial interests. Adrian grabbed the first page. His eyes moved quickly over terms he had never associated with me. Retained equity, investment accounts, acquisition proceeds, asset valuation. Then another reference caught his attention. A trust structure connected to investments created from business proceeds. Adrian dropped the page onto the desk. She never told me about this. His attorney looked up. That isn't the question the court will ask. What does that mean? It means these assets have documentation. We have records showing their origin, ownership history, transactions, and valuations. Adrian flipped through another page. How much? We're still dealing with classifications and valuations in the filings. How much is she worth? His attorney did not give him the answer he wanted. Instead, he slid another stack of documents toward him. You should have read these when I told you to. Adrian stared at the pages. And suddenly, pieces of our marriage began returning to him. The late-night calls he used to complain about. Can you take that somewhere else? I have work tomorrow. The legal envelopes that arrived at the house. What's all this? Company paperwork. Okay. The 2 trips I had taken for shareholder meetings. He had barely asked where I was going. Then there was Daniel Mesa, the man waiting for me at the restaurant. The acquisition Adrian had searched afterward. My maiden name buried among people connected to the company. For the first time, he could no longer dismiss those details individually. They pointed in the same direction. He looked at his attorney. She owned part of that company? His attorney folded his hands. You need to focus on what is documented, not what you assumed. Adrian sank into the chair. Then his lawyer pulled out another document. And we have a second problem. What now? The money you transferred. Joint account. Adrian's attention snapped back. I already explained that. You explained why you did it. That doesn't make the transfer disappear. It was mostly money I earned. It was in a marital account, Adrian. The transfer is traceable. And the timing is documented. Adrian leaned forward. So what happens? The court can account for those funds when distributing the marital assets. His jaw tightened. The move he had made to give himself leverage was now something he would have to explain. He had expected me to panic when I saw the account balance. Instead, I had saved the records. Suddenly, Adrian wanted something he had refused to offer me time. That evening, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. I almost let it go unanswered. Then I picked up. What do you want, Adrian? His voice sounded different. No laughter, no lecture about how difficult my life would become. I've been thinking about us. I waited. Maybe we rushed this. I looked down at the papers on my desk. You hired an attorney before telling me you wanted a divorce. I know. You transferred money before telling me. I know that too. And now we're rushing. Neretsa, people make decisions when they're emotional. You weren't emotional when you moved the money. Silence. Then he tried again. We had good years. What changed between last week and today? Nothing. I've just had time to think. I almost smiled. No, Adrian. You've had time to read. Another silence. Longer this time. I leaned back in my chair. Do you want your marriage back, or did you finally read the financial paperwork? Neretsa. Which one? That's not fair. It's a very simple question. He could not answer it. That told me everything I needed to know. From now on, speak to my attorney. Neretsa. Wait. I ended the call. By the morning of the hearing, Adrian had regained enough of his confidence to perform it. He arrived in an expensive suit. He shook hands with his attorney. He joked in the hallway. And when the divorce papers were placed before him, he laughed again as he signed. But now I understood why. He was pretending. He had seen enough of my records to know he had been wrong. He simply did not yet know by how much. I sat across the courtroom as the judge moved through the financial declarations. Adrian signed the final page and put down his pen. His attorney suddenly leaned toward him. The judge turned to my disclosure. Adrian's fingers stopped moving. Before he could ask his lawyer what was coming, the judge looked down at the verified documents and began to speak. Regarding Mrs. Cole's independently verified net assets. The courtroom went completely quiet. The judge glanced down at the documents. The financial declaration reflects approximately $18.7 million in net assets. Adrian stopped moving. For several seconds, he simply stared at the judge. Then he turned toward his attorney. What? His lawyer didn't answer. The judge continued. The supporting document identifies proceeds originating from the acquisition of Mrs. Cole's interest in a financial software company, retained equity, subsequent investment holdings, and separately maintained accounts whose source records have been provided. Adrian's face changed. The smile he had carried into the courtroom was gone. 18 million, he whispered. 18.7, his attorney quietly corrected. Adrian grabbed the financial disclosure in front of him. That can't be right. His attorney leaned closer. The documentation was provided, Adrian. When? During disclosure. Adrian stared at him. You knew. I told you to read it. Across the courtroom, I remained silent. There was nothing I needed to say. For years, Adrian had treated my work as a hobby because it happened behind a laptop instead of inside a corporate office. But the numbers in front of the judge had a history. Long before Adrian reached the level of success he liked to boast about, I had helped build a financial software platform with a former university colleague. The early years were not glamorous. Most of what I earned went straight back into the company. When investors became interested, I retained my ownership rather than cashing out early. Years later, a larger technology company acquired the business. I sold most of my interest. I retained some equity. Then I invested much of the proceeds instead of changing my lifestyle. No mansion. No collection of luxury cars. No sudden designer wardrobe. My money grew quietly because I never needed strangers or my husband to see it. The judge continued reviewing the documents. Adrian barely seemed to hear her. He was looking at me now. Not with superiority. With disbelief. A short recess was called. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I heard him behind me. Narija. I stopped. Adrian approached quickly. Why didn't you tell me? I stared at him. I did. No. You did not tell me you had $18 million. I told you about the company. That's different. I told you when investors approached us. Adrian opened his mouth. I continued. I told you about the shareholder meetings. I told you when acquisition negotiations started. His expression tightened. You never said it was this serious. I tried. A memory seemed to reach him. Years earlier, I had opened a bottle of wine after receiving our first major acquisition proposal. I had been excited. Adrian had come home furious because someone else at work had received recognition he believed should have gone to him. My news waited, then disappeared beneath his. I looked directly at him. I didn't hide my life from you, Adrian. You stopped paying attention to it. He had no answer. We returned to the courtroom, and his net worth shock was not the only financial issue waiting for him. The judge addressed the money transferred from our joint account shortly before the divorce papers were served. The records were clear. Dates, amounts, destination. Adrian's attempt to move the funds had not made them vanish. The traceable marital money could still be accounted for in the financial settlement. His attempt to create an advantage had accomplished nothing except leave a documented record of what he had done. I did not ask to ruin him. I did not demand revenge. I wanted a fair resolution. My separate assets remained supported by the documentation establishing their history and source, while the marital assets were handled through the settlement process. Adrian kept what he was legitimately entitled to. So did I. But he left that courtroom without the one thing he had brought in abundance: superiority. Word eventually reached some of the mutual friends who had listened to him joke about me. The same people who had heard him predict that I would struggle without his salary now understood how badly he had misjudged our marriage. I didn't post anything. I didn't expose him online. I didn't call anyone to correct the record. I didn't need to. Adrian had spent months telling people his version of the story. Now he had to live with the fact that his own boasting made the truth more embarrassing. Outside the courthouse, I heard him call my name one final time. Narija, please. 5 minutes, I stopped beside the steps. What is it? He approached slowly. We had good years. We did. I know I became arrogant. I waited. I said things I shouldn't have said. Yes. He looked toward the courthouse doors. Maybe we could try counseling. I studied his face. A few months earlier, that suggestion might have mattered before the secret transfer, before the humiliation. Before he had spent weeks telling people I couldn't survive without him. I asked him one question. Would you be asking me this if the judge had said 18,000 instead of 18 million? His lips parted. Nothing came out. I waited. Still nothing. His silence was the clearest answer he had given me throughout the entire divorce. I nodded once. Goodbye, Adrian. Then I walked away. Months later, I moved into a comfortable home that I chose because I liked it, not because it impressed anyone. I became more involved with the investments and business interests I had spent years keeping quietly in the background, but the biggest change had nothing to do with money. I stopped minimizing myself. When someone asked what I did, I answered. When I accomplished something, I allowed myself it. I reconnected with friends without wondering whether Adrian would dismiss them, interrupt me, or redirect every conversation toward himself. For years, I had thought keeping the peace was maturity. Eventually, I understood that constantly making myself smaller was not peace. It was disappearance. One afternoon, the final confirmation arrived that every remaining matter connected to the divorce had been closed. I opened the document, read it once, then placed it on my desk. There was no champagne, no revenge party, No dramatic social media announcement. I closed the file and returned to my work. Somewhere else, Adrian still had his career. He still had his salary. He still had the polished suits and the professional reputation he had worked so hard to build. What he no longer had was the woman he had been certain could never survive without him. Adrian entered that courtroom laughing because he thought the divorce would prove how much I needed him. But when the judge read out my $18.7 million net worth, he finally learned that the only thing I had truly needed was the courage to leave.